Tyler, Nara's bodyguard and driver, was already waiting outside the hospital when he saw Gordon and her leave the hospital building. As soon as he spotted them, he quickly got out of the car and rushed over to open the door. Nara, now able to walk on her own, limped slightly. Despite her insistence that she was fine, Gordon held her hand to assist her. "Good morning, sir." "Good morning, ma'am." Tyler greeted them as Gordon helped Nara into the car. Gordon responded with a nod in response to Tyler's greeting. Once they were both settled inside, Tyler shut the door and returned to the driver's seat. He started the car, his hands steady on the steering wheel, and asked, "Where are we headed to, sir? Should we go home first?" Before Gordon could respond, a loud rumbling from Nara's stomach interrupted the moment. He remembered that neither of them had eaten the night before. They had been too distracted by the events of the day. Gordon felt his own hunger, and as he glanced at his watch, he realized it was still early enough to grab breakfast before heading home. He also had a meeting with his father later that day, and there was enough time to prepare. "Take us to any five-star restaurant," he instructed. Nara turned to him with a smile. "A five-star restaurant? Don't you think we're a little underdressed for that?" she said, eyeing their casual attire. He looked down at his clothes and then at hers. She had a point. They were far from appropriately dressed for a fancy restaurant. "You know what?" Nara suggested. "Why don't we just find a pastry shop and grab some breakfast there?" "Pastries?" Gordon asked, surprised by the suggestion. "Yes? Don't you like the idea?" Gordon paused for a moment before replying. "It's not a bad idea, but do you know of any good pastry shops around?" Nara thought for a second, shaking her head. "I don't think so. Tyler, do you know of any—" Tyler, who had been quietly watching them through the rearview mirror, spoke up. "I think I know of a place, ma'am." Nara's eyes lit up. "Really? Where is it? It's the biggest pastry shop in town, and it's not very far from here. I'm surprised you haven't heard about it." Her eyes widened in excitement. "The biggest in town? It must be popular then." Tyler nodded. "Yes, ma'am. It's quite well known. People usually line up to get inside." Gordon and Nara exchanged surprised glances. Tyler looked at his watch, a slight smile on his face. "We're lucky today. It opens in about 20 minutes, so we should make it just in time before the rush." "Perfect," Nara said, beaming. "Let's hurry up then. We don't want to be late." Tyler immediately turned the ignition key and sped off, determined not to disappoint them. He knew how quickly the pastry shop could fill up and wanted to make sure they arrived before the crowd. With both Nara and Gordon being public figures, he knew their presence might stir attention, and he was keen to avoid any unnecessary commotion. He focused on the road, driving as fast as he could while still being careful. They reached the pastry shop just in time. As soon as he pulled the car to a stop, they saw an elderly woman in a chef's uniform step outside. She flipped the closed sign to open, signaling the shop was ready for business. Tyler glanced back at Gordon and Nara. "We've arrived," he announced, switching off the engine. Nara looked around curiously, surprised she had never noticed the shop before, despite its apparent size and popularity. It was quaint and charming, a perfect spot for a quiet morning breakfast. "Do you have anything in mind you'd like me to get for you?" Tyler asked, eager to assist. Nara smiled. "Oh no, we'll be going in ourselves," she replied. Gordon turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "In your condition?" he asked, sounding a bit skeptical. "I told you I'm perfectly fine," Nara insisted. "It's just a twisted ankle, not my whole leg. Besides, why come all the way here and not go inside?" With that, she opened her car door. Tyler quickly got out of the driver's seat and rushed to her side to help her. But she was already standing, determined to show she could handle herself. Gordon, watching the scene unfold, shook his head and chuckled. He knew Nara could be stubborn at times, and this was one of those moments. Still, her determination was one of the things he admired most about her. He glanced out the window at the shop. It wasn't the kind of place he would usually frequent, at least not on a typical day. It was modest, certainly not the upscale venue he was used to, but it had a charm to it, warm, welcoming, and cozy. For Nara, he'd make an exception. He slowly opened his car door, stepping out to join her. Nara limped slightly as she walked over to his side. "Let's go in," she said with a bright smile. Gordon sighed, but smiled back. "You're limping," he pointed out, extending his hand. "You know this isn't up for debate. Let me help." "I told you I could walk on my own," she protested playfully, but it was clear she wasn't going to win this one. Nara gave in and let him hold her hand, feeling a mix of frustration and affection. In truth, she liked the way he cared for her, the way he held her hand so protectively. It made her feel safe and cherished. As they approached the entrance, she stole a few glances at him, admiring his quiet strength. Despite his gruff exterior, Gordon was gentle with her in ways that mattered. He was, in many ways, the perfect gentleman. Gordon pushed open the door, and a small bell rang, announcing their arrival. The smell of freshly baked bread and pastries filled the air, warm and comforting. Nara breathed in deeply and smiled. The cozy interior was just as inviting as the aroma. Shelves were lined with an array of pastries, croissants, tarts, eclairs, and more, all beautifully arranged behind glass displays. "This place might be just as good as Tyler described," Nara said, smiling as she took in the sights and smells. Gordon looked around, impressed. Although it wasn't his usual five-star restaurant, there was something charming about this place. He squeezed Nara's hand gently and they moved further inside. Nara beamed at her and glanced over the assortment of pastries. "This looks wonderful," she exclaimed in excitement. Nara's eyes wandered around the pastry shop, taking in the delicious sight of freshly baked pastries displayed in a glass case. Just the sight of them made her mouth water. As she turned her head, she spotted something that made her smile widen. Croissants, her favorite. They were sitting pretty on the display, golden and flaky. She couldn't wait to dig in. "It seems like we're the first ones here," she remarked, noticing the absence of other customers. Gordon nodded in agreement, gently tightening his grip on her hand as they walked up to the counter. A petite girl stood there, completely absorbed in the registers, so engrossed that she hadn't noticed them come in, even with the bells clanging when they opened the door. "Hello?" Gordon greeted her, trying to get her attention. The girl's head shot up, and as soon as her eyes landed on them, her face froze in shock. She stared at them, wide-eyed, as if she had just seen a ghost. "Hello?" Gordon repeated, his voice softer now, confused by her reaction. Suddenly, the girl let out a loud scream, covering her mouth with her hands in disbelief. Nara and Gordon flinched, startled by the outburst. For a moment, they thought something was wrong with her. "Are you okay?" Nara asked, her voice gentle but laced with concern, trying to understand what had just happened. The girl's hands trembled as she pointed at them. "I know you. And you," she stammered, her voice shaking with excitement. "I've seen you on the news." Her eyes filled with tears, tears of joy. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. I can't believe this. I must be dreaming," she mumbled, pinching herself to check if it was real. When she realized it was, she screamed again, louder this time. "Oh my God, this is really happening." Just then, a young woman, dressed casually but wearing an apron, rushed out from the back, alarmed by the noise. She stopped in her tracks when she saw Nara and Gordon, her eyes widening in recognition. But unlike the girl at the counter, she quickly composed herself. "What's going on? Why are you screaming?" the woman asked, a hint of irritation in her voice as she entered the front of the shop. The younger girl turned to her, still shaking with excitement. "Ma'am, look, that's—" "Stop that!" the woman interrupted, her tone firm. "Can't you see you're making our customers uncomfortable?" "But ma'am, they're—" "I said enough." The woman cut her off sharply. "Get inside." The girl reluctantly placed down the item she had been holding and quietly slipped through the door the woman had emerged from earlier. The woman, now standing behind the counter, smiled apologetically. "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. I hope she didn't startle you," she said, her tone warm and polite. "Oh no, it's fine," Nara responded with a smile. As she spoke, she couldn't help but study the woman. They appeared to be around the same age, and the woman had a natural beauty about her. Her hair was tied up in a bun with a hairnet, and Nara noticed a fresh scar on her forehead. It piqued her curiosity, but she chose not to ask. The woman returned the smile. "What can I get for you today?" Nara glanced around before deciding. "2 croissants and 2 freshly baked cakes," she said. Then, turning to Gordon, she asked, "What about you?" "I'll have the same," Gordon replied without hesitation. The woman nodded and disappeared into the back to prepare their order. As soon as she left, Gordon leaned closer to Nara. "Don't you think that girl was a little strange?" he asked, referring to the younger girl from earlier. Nara laughed softly. "She wasn't strange, just excited to see us. It's kind of sweet, actually." Just then the woman returned carrying their order neatly packed in a beautifully designed bag. That was quick, Nara said impressed. The woman smiled and handed them the bag. Gordon reached for his card to pay, but the woman stopped him, shaking her head. No need. It's on the house, she said with a smile. Gordon blinked, surprised. Really? Yes, it's on the house, she repeated. Nara beamed at the unexpected generosity. Thank you so much. It's nothing, the woman replied, her smile warm and genuine. What's your name? Nara asked immediately. She had taken a liking to her, and he didn't know why. Love, the woman replied. My name is Love. Love? That's a beautiful name, Nara said, her smile brightening. Well, we'll be on our way now. I hope to see you again, Love said, her eyes sparkling with hope. It's not every day a celebrity walks into my bakery, Nara chuckled. We'll be back for sure, she promised. With that, Nara and Gordon turned to leave, her hand in his as they exited the bakery with their delicious pastries in tow. Almost immediately, Jeffrey came out from the back of the bakery, an apron tied around his waist and a hairnet on his head. What happened? Why was Lucy screaming like that? He asked, concern etched in his voice. Love turned to him, her face lit with excitement. You won't believe it. Gordon Antonov and his wife Nara were just here. Jeffrey's eyes widened in shock. Gordon and Nara had been in the bakery just moments before he walked in. His mind raced as he imagined what might have happened if they had seen him there. A wave of panic crept over him, but he quickly tried to mask it. Love noticed the shift in his expression. What's wrong? She asked, sensing something was off. Oh, nothing, Jeffrey replied, forcing a smile. Really? It's nothing. Are you sure? She pressed, still looking concerned. Of course, he said a bit too quickly, trying to brush it off. Come on, let's get back to the inside. I'm almost done kneading the dough. With that, he gently took her hand, guiding her back into the bakery, hoping to keep his worries hidden for now. Jacob sat in his office, deeply engrossed in the glow of his laptop screen. The steady clacking of his fingers on the keyboard filled the air. Suddenly, the sound was interrupted by a knock at the door. Startled, he sighed and lifted his head. He removed his glasses, which had been perfectly perched on his nose, and placed them gently on the desk and rubbed his eyes with his right hand, exhaustion creeping in. Another sigh escaped him. He hated being interrupted when he was deeply immersed in work. For a brief moment he thought it might be Gordon. He looked at his watch. It was a little too early for Gordon to come. Puzzled, he wondered who else it could be. Come in, he called out, leaning back into his chair, resigned to the distraction. The door opened slowly, and Peter walked in with a casual smile spread across his face. Peter, my friend. I didn't know you were coming, Jacob said, his mood immediately lifting as he stood to greet him. He quickly crossed the room, extending his hand in excitement. The two men exchanged a firm handshake, smiling. I was in the area and thought I'd drop by, Peter said with a grin. Jacob smiled. In a way, he was glad that Peter had come. He actually needed something that would distract him from the series of thoughts that was going on in his head. His mind had been occupied with Briston ever since he left the house. Seeing Peter standing in front of him faced him a sense of relaxation. At least he would be able to take his mind away from thoughts concerning Briston. That's thoughtful of you, Jacob said, his smile lingering as they both made their way to the sofa in the middle of the office. They sat down, facing each other from opposite ends of the couch. What can I offer you to drink? Jacob asked, rising from his seat and heading towards the sleek, polished wine cellar in the corner of his office. Whiskey will do, Peter replied without hesitation. Jacob nodded and reached for the bottle of whiskey resting at the bottom right of the cellar. Grabbing 2 glasses, he returned to his seat. He placed the whiskey and glasses on the table, then carefully unscrewed the cap and poured the amber liquid into both glasses. Handing one to Peter, he settled into his seat and took a long drink, letting out a loud sigh as the weight of his thoughts pressed down on him. Peter observed him closely, his brow furrowing with concern. He knew something was bothering him. What's wrong? You look worried, Peter asked, leaning forward slightly. Jacob glanced at him, a weary smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Is it that obvious? He asked, setting his glass on the table. Of course, you're not your usual self. So tell me, what's eating you up? Peter urged, his voice full of concern. Jacob sighed deeply, shaking his head in frustration. Sometimes I wonder whether Briston is actually my son. Peter's expression shifted from concern to alarm. What? How do you mean? He asked, his tone almost incredulous. It's the way he behaves. I just don't understand him anymore. I wish he'd been more like his brother Gordon, Jacob said, his voice laced with sadness. Peter, still confused, pressed further. Jacob, you're not making sense. What has Briston done this time? Jacob shook his head as if trying to rid himself of the frustration building inside. You won't believe what that rascal told me this morning. He said he's getting married to Yvonne by the end of the month. Peter's eyes widened in shock. Yvonne? The same Yvonne who slapped him during dinner a few days ago? Jacob nodded gravely. Yes, my friend, the very same. I don't get it. Wasn't she the one who slapped him in front of everyone and stormed out of the house? How could they possibly be getting married now? Peter asked, utterly baffled. Jacob threw his hands up in disbelief. Apparently they talked things over, and Briston apologized for overwhelming her, so now she's agreed to the wedding date. Peter sat back, still processing the situation. I can't believe it. Are you sure this is what he really wants? He asked. Jacob sighed again, shaking his head. I honestly don't know. He's made up his mind, but I'm worried he's making a huge mistake. What sort of nonsense is that? Has Briston gone blind that he can't see what's right in front of him? Peter exclaimed, frustration creeping into his voice. Same question I asked myself when he told me the news, Jacob replied bitterly. And you should have seen his face this morning. He smiled like someone who had just won the lottery. Peter couldn't help but burst into laughter. What if he's trying to revolt? He asked, the thought striking him suddenly. Revolt? For what exactly? Jacob asked, clearly surprised by the suggestion. Well, first off, the company, Peter began. Oh, spare me that, Jacob interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. That's not enough reason for him to behave like a fool. Peter set his glass on the table, the humor fading from his face as he asked, What's Penelope saying about all of this? Jacob hissed in annoyance, causing Peter to raise an eyebrow. What's wrong? He asked, sensing there was more to the story. Penelope and I haven't spoken since dinner. Jacob admitted reluctantly. What? Why? Peter asked, astonished. Jacob sighed, leaning back in his seat. Sometimes I think Briston takes after his mother. Two senseless people, he muttered. Peter laughed heartily. What's Penelope done this time? He asked, amused by Jacob's frustration. I sometimes wonder how I've stayed married to her all these years. Despite her horrible character, Jacob confessed, shaking his head. I can't even explain it. You just have to take it easy on them, Peter advised. But seriously, how did you even let Briston get engaged to Yvonne? That girl is awful, especially after what she said about Miriam. Jacob sighed deeply, nodding in agreement. Exactly, that's the problem. She doesn't know how to control her tongue, and beyond that, I feel like there's something sinister about her that I can't quite put my finger on. Something sinister? Peter asked, looking confused. Yes, of course. What baffles me even more is that she's Nara's sister. It's hard to believe they're related, Jacob said, shaking his head. Peter smiled knowingly. You seem to have taken quite a liking to Nara already. Jacob gave him a sidelong glance but didn't deny it. Of course, who wouldn't? At least she's sensible and more reserved than Yvonne, he muttered. You're right, Gordon definitely made the right choice getting married to Nara, Peter said, agreeing with Jacob. At this point, I'm at a loss on what to do, Jacob admitted, shaking his head. Peter sighed thoughtfully. You need to have a one-on-one chat with Briston. Talk some sense into him. Jacob chuckled. You seem to forget who Briston is. As much as he can be foolish at times, you and I both know that once he sets his mind on something, he follows through with it. Peter nodded. That's true. So, what do you intend to do now? I've made it clear at home, Briston will never marry Yvonne, whether he likes it or not. That's my decision, and I stand by it. Also, I think it's time I speed up the process of handing the company over to Gordon, Jacob said with finality. Peter raised an eyebrow. Are you sure about that? Don't you think you might be acting a little too hastily? Hasty? What do you mean? Peter waved his hand dismissively. You know what? Never mind. Do what you think is best. Just then, there was a knock on the door. It opened, and Gordon walked in. "Gordon?" Jacob exclaimed, looking up. "Uncle Peter?" Gordon said with surprise, smiling broadly. "Such a pleasant surprise to see you here." Peter grinned. "Likewise, Gordon. It's good to see you." "Well, I came to pay your father a visit, but it seems I'll be on my way now," Peter said, rising to his feet. "I hope I'm not chasing you away," Gordon said softly. "Oh, no. I have an appointment," Peter replied with a reassuring smile. "Okay, Uncle Peter." "By the way, how's Nora? She left quite a good impression on Miriam. Miriam hasn't stopped talking about her." "Really?" Gordon asked, surprised but pleased. "Yes, of course. Send my regards to her," Peter said warmly. Then he turned to Jacob. "I'll be on my way now, Jacob. We're still going golfing, right?" "Oh yes, definitely. And Gordon can bring Nora along," Jacob said, smiling. "That's a great idea. Well, I'll leave you two to talk." Peter smiled as he made his way to the door. As soon as Peter left, Gordon turned to face his father, immediately noticing the sadness Jacob could no longer hide. "Dad, what's wrong?" Gordon asked, his voice filled with concern. "It's about your brother," Jacob said, sighing heavily. Gordon immediately sighed as well, sitting down on the sofa. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, downing it in one swift gulp. "What has he done this time?" he asked, his tone weary. Jacob leaned back in his chair. His frustration was very clear in his face. He looked at Gordon, and he knew that what he was about to ask of him was highly impossible. He knew that Gordon and Briston never met eye to eye. In fact, they were like two opposite poles, but regardless of what Gordon was going to say, he was still going to make an attempt. "I want you to have a talk with your brother." Immediately, Gordon heard the words come out from his father's mouth. He immediately burst into laughter. He laughed so loudly that everyone in the next room must have heard. "Come on, Dad. Since when did you become a comedian?" Gordon asked him, still laughing. "Does it look like I am joking?" Jacob asked him, keeping a straight, composed face. Gordon, noticing the look on his face, stopped laughing immediately. "Hold on, Dad, you are really serious." "Of course I am. Your brother is about to make the biggest mistake of his life, and I cannot just sit back and watch it happen, so you will do me a favor, put aside your differences and have a talk with him. Maybe he might listen to you," Jacob suggested. "Dad, you are really asking for the impossible. You of all people should know how irrelevant Briston's problems are to me. It is none of my business. I'm sorry, Dad, but I cannot do what you have asked for." Jacob sighed and looked at Gordon. In a way, he knew he was right. He knew Gordon did not even give a slightest interest in Briston. But he was out of options right now. "Do it for me. Just have a conversation with him, that's all." "But Dad, why don't you just let him marry Yvonne since she's what he wants rather than escalating everything?" Gordon suggested. "You and I know she is not a good person." "Then why did you let them get engaged in the first place?" Jacob stopped to think for a while. Gordon was actually right. How exactly did he let them get engaged? He thought to himself. Well, the die has already been cast. Just have a conversation with him. Maybe he might listen to you. Gordon looked at his father. He could see desperation in his eyes. For as much as he hated Briston, he still had to do what his father had told him. "Okay, Dad, I will do it," he said finally. "Really? Thank you so much. Now I can relax a bit now," Jacob said, smiling. Gordon nodded his head. "So tell me, Dad, what is it you wanted us to discuss?" "Oh, that reminds me, it's about the company." Gordon sat upright immediately. "The company?" "Oh yes. I think it's time I hand it over to you," Jacob announced. Gordon's eyes lit up in excitement. Immediately he heard these words from his father. Nara had just stepped out of the shower, her hair soaked with water, droplets hitting the floor as she limped toward her table. She picked up the hand dryer and switched it on, the loud whooshing sound of air filling the room. Moving the dryer in circular motions around her head, she used her other hand to separate sections of her hair, allowing the cool air to flow through. She continued this rhythm until she was sure her hair was dry. Placing the dryer back on the table, she limped to her wardrobe to get dressed. Once she had slipped into her clothes, she was ready to lie down. The pressure on her broken ankle had been immense throughout the day. She needed some painkillers to relieve the pain. She desperately needed rest. But just as she was about to stretch out on the bed, her phone rang. She looked around the room in search of the phone. Soon she realized that she had left it on the dressing table. The idea of getting up was unbearable. Her body ached and her ankle throbbed. She decided to ignore the call, stretching out fully and pulling the large duvet over herself. Glancing at the clock, she noticed it was almost noon. Gordon had promised to be back by now, right after their visit to Love's Bakery. The delay made her wonder what could be keeping him. With a deep sigh, she shut her eyes, trying to let sleep take over. But no sooner had she closed her eyes than her mind drifted back to Love. Nara couldn't stop thinking about the bakery owner and, more specifically, the scar on her forehead. She had been curious about it for a while but didn't know how to bring it up without sounding intrusive. It was a delicate subject, and she didn't want to offend Love by asking about something so personal. Still, her mind kept circling back to that scar. She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away, attempting to distract herself from Love. But it wasn't long before her thoughts wandered again, this time to Vanessa Crudge and her infamous rehearsal mishap. Nara couldn't help but smirk at the memory of her epic fall during the rehearsals. Her heartbeat quickened as she lay in bed, thoughts swirling in her mind. She desperately wanted to be one of the girls chosen to walk the runway. This show was more than just an opportunity. It was a chance to finally step into the spotlight and boost her status in the competitive modeling world. She knew that a lot of dignitaries would be in attendance, and who wouldn't want to watch a show where Vanessa Crudge herself had trained the models? But with the way things had been going, she began to doubt if she would be one of the lucky few. She could still feel the sting of her fall during rehearsals. It was a hard one, both physically and emotionally. She vividly remembered the looks of the other girls as they watched her hit the ground. Some had gazed at her with pity, while others looked almost excited, as if they were just waiting for her to fail. The memory of those gawking eyes haunted her. But more than that, Vanessa's voice still rang in her ears, screaming, "Again!" as if disappointed in her. She couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa expected more from her and that she had let her down. Frustrated, she turned over in bed, shifting from her left side to her right, trying to settle herself and find some peace. She shut her eyes, hoping to drift off to sleep, but once again her mind wandered. This time, she thought of Yvonne. She couldn't lie. Yvonne's walk was flawless, something to be admired. She had only seen her walk on television, never in person, as Gwen had always kept her far away from Yvonne's rehearsals when they were young. Nara bit her lip, thinking about what she needed to do. She knew she had to train harder, especially when it came to walking in those heavy heels. She could perfect any other kind of walk, but heavy heels, that was her weakness. Sighing deeply, she reached down to touch her swollen ankle with her other leg. It was still tender, the swelling not having gone down. But despite the pain, she knew she had to push through. Injured or not, she was determined to train. She had no other choice. The next rehearsal was critical, and she needed to prove herself to Vanessa. This wasn't just about the runway anymore. It was about redemption, about showing that she was capable despite her setbacks. Nara knew most of the girls, including Yvonne, weren't happy she was there, but she didn't care. They thought she was incapable, but she was determined to prove them wrong. Injury or no injury, she was going to perfect her walk before the next rehearsal. She had to. Just as she settled into her thoughts, her phone rang again. She sighed deeply, knowing she should answer it. It could be important, maybe even Gordon. She dragged herself out of bed, walking lazily to the table as the phone continued ringing and vibrating. When she finally picked it up, she glanced at the caller ID. Andrew. Her eyes lit up in surprise. She had completely forgotten about Andrew since their last dinner together. They hadn't spoken since, and while she'd seen his missed calls, he always seemed to ring at the worst times. She hesitated for a moment, then answered and gently placed the phone to her ear. "Hello?" she muttered softly. "Nara, I've been trying to reach you. I've been calling for days, but you haven't been picking up." Andrew's voice was filled with frustration. Nara rolled her eyes in irritation. "I've been busy." "Busy with what?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Work." We've been rehearsing for the next runway show coming up soon, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Oh, I see. How are you, though? Andrew's voice softened. I'm fine. I just had a little accident. Accident? He exclaimed, alarmed. What happened? Well, nothing too serious, Nara explained. I fell during rehearsals and sprained my ankle, but it's fine now. Gordon and I went to the hospital and the swelling is going down. Gordon? Andrew's voice took on a slight edge. You called Gordon first when you got hurt? Why didn't you call me? Nara paused, sensing the tension in his voice. I don't know. Gordon was just there when it happened. He's been helping me a lot. Andrew sighed at the other end of the line. I just wish you'd called me Nara. I could have helped. Nara bit her lip, unsure how to respond. I didn't mean to leave you out, Andrew. It just happened. Andrew remained silent for a moment, then spoke quietly. Just don't forget about me, okay? He just came to pick me up. That's how we ended up at the hospital, she added, hoping to wrap the topic up quickly. Andrew remained quiet, and she could hear his steady breathing at the other end of the line. The silence was stretching on too long. Are you still there? She asked softly. It's fine, Andrew replied, but his voice was low, tinged with sadness. Well, I was actually calling to talk to you about something, he continued, but since your leg is injured, I don't think you'll be able to come out for coffee and discuss it. You can say it over the phone, I'm listening, Nara replied, trying to sound more open. Andrew cleared his throat. It's about Elena. At the mention of Elena's name, Nara felt her chest tighten and her ears burn. I don't want to hear anything about her, Andrew. Elena stopped being my friend the day she broke my trust and lied to my face. Calm down, Nara. It was all a misunderstanding, Andrew said, trying to soothe her. Andrew, I don't want to hear it, she snapped, cutting him off. Just listen to me, please, he pleaded. Nara stayed quiet for a moment, trying to rein in her emotions. She glanced down at her swollen ankle. Standing was making it worse, so she limped back to the bed and sat down, shifting the phone to her other ear. As much as she didn't want to hear anything about Elena, part of her was curious. And what harm would an explanation do at this point? She had already made up her mind about her. Okay, she muttered. Go ahead. You can talk. Andrew hesitated for a moment, then continued. I know you feel betrayed, but Elena never meant to hurt you. She's been trying to reach out, but she's afraid you'll shut her out again. She still cares about you, Nara. Nara clenched her jaw, unsure if she wanted to hear more, but she let him continue. I just thought you should know that. You don't have to forgive her, but at least give her a chance to explain herself. Nara sighed, her mind racing. Could she really open that door again? Well, it was all a misunderstanding. On the contrary, Elena never wanted to tell me anything about the contract. I was the one that forced her to say something about it, Andrew said, his voice softening. Nara raised an eyebrow, still skeptical. How do you mean forced her? She asked. Well, back then I was hurt and crying and I begged her to tell me what was going on. She made me promise not to say anything, but somehow I let it slip. I didn't mean for it to come out, Andrew explained, his voice laced with regret. Nara remained silent, waiting for him to get to the point. So? She finally asked, her tone sharp. Please, Nara, don't hold this against her. It was all just a misunderstanding. Elena hasn't been herself ever since. She's been calling me non-stop, trying to find a way to make things right, Andrew said, sighing deeply as though he'd run out of ways to plead her case. Nara kept quiet, her thoughts racing. You know what baffles me the most in all of this? How did she even know where your house was? I don't remember Elena and I ever visiting you together, she said, her suspicion growing. I invited her for coffee, Andrew replied quickly, almost as if he'd rehearsed the response. We were talking about me getting you back. I swear she meant no harm. Nara sighed deeply, feeling more conflicted than ever. Andrew, you know all of this is hard for me to process right now, she said, her voice tinged with frustration. I know, Andrew replied gently, but all I'm asking is for you to forgive her. That's all. Please, give her another chance. Nara exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the conversation pressing down on her. I need to rest and think about everything you've said. Oh? Okay, that's no problem. When's your next rehearsal? I could come see you then. Andrew offered, his tone hopeful. Don't worry about that, Nara replied, already feeling tired. I told you, Jacob's got his eyes on Gordon and me, so we need to be careful. Oh, that's true, Andrew said, his voice dipping with disappointment. Okay then, get some rest and take care of yourself. I love you. Nara hesitated, the words feeling hollow. She couldn't deny the strange irritation that had settled over her throughout the conversation. Nara? I said I love you, Andrew repeated, as if waiting for reassurance. And I love you too, she replied reluctantly, the words slipping out without conviction. She quickly hung up before the awkwardness could deepen. Placing her phone on the bedside table, she leaned back on her bed, pulling the blanket over herself. As she lay there, she realized that she had been unusually cold towards Andrew. The sound of his voice, which had once brought her comfort, now felt irritating, like a dull throb in the back of her mind. She couldn't believe how long she had gone without caring whether he called or not. It shocked her how many things had changed between them. Staring at the ceiling, she wondered what exactly was happening to her. Why wasn't she happy anymore? Why wasn't Andrew's voice enough? The questions swirled in her mind, heavy and confusing. She closed her eyes slowly, trying to push it all away. Before long, she fell asleep. The soft ticking of the clock on the wall the only sound in the quiet room. I hope you're happy now, Andrew said to Elena as soon as he hung up the phone after talking to Nara. They sat across from each other in a cozy coffee shop. Andrew had specifically asked Elena to meet him there so he could speak to Nara on her behalf, face to face, and put an end to her constant blackmail and demands. Elena's eyes lit up with anticipation. What did she say? She didn't say anything, Andrew replied calmly. You must be joking, Elena scoffed, narrowing her eyes at him. He kept a straight face. Do you really think I'd call you out here just to joke? Be reasonable, Elena. She rolled her eyes. So after everything you said, she had nothing to say, nothing at all? Well, she said she needed to rest and process the whole thing, Andrew added, watching her expression shift from skepticism to frustration. Elena sighed heavily and leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Her face was etched with annoyance, clearly dissatisfied with the outcome. Andrew studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. You know, something about all of this really baffles me. I've been thinking about it for a while now, he began, at the same time looking at her. Elena shot him an irritated glance. Look, Andrew, I am not in the mood for any of your stupid talks right now, she snapped. Andrew smiled, already used to Elena's sharp, cutting words. You know, he began slowly, I've been thinking, why are you so desperate for Nara's forgiveness? Because as far as I remember, you never even considered her a friend, so tell me, Elena, what exactly are you hiding in that black heart of yours? Elena's eyes widened in surprise, momentarily thrown off by his bluntness. What do you mean by that? She snapped, her tone laced with anger. You know what I mean, Andrew pressed, his voice steady and challenging. You and I both know you're far too self-centered to care about anyone but yourself. So, what's your angle here? What's the real plan? Elena stared at him for a few moments, her face expressionless. Then, shaking her head slightly, she stood up. You only need to worry about getting Nara to forgive me, she said coldly, her voice measured. Whatever plans I have are none of your business. Don't think you have the right to meddle in my affairs. Andrew leaned back, crossing his arms. Oh, but that's where you're wrong, Elena. I have every right to meddle in anything that involves Nara. At the mention of Nara's name, Elena burst into loud, mocking laughter. So you're still holding on to the hope that Nara will come back to you after her one-year contract with Gordon is up? She asked, her voice dripping with amusement. Of course I am, Andrew said firmly, unshaken. Do you have a problem with that? So you really think Nara will actually come back to you? She asked again, laughing. Andrew looked at her confused as to why she was laughing. Yes, of course, Dot, she promised, he said strongly. You know I would advise you to just move on with your life. I mean, you need to see the way she looks at him. It's different. Completely different from the way she looks at you, she said, still laughing. Coming from someone that can't keep a man? He snapped at her. Elena stopped laughing, her lips curling into a smirk. Delusion, complete delusion, she muttered. Well, I'll leave you to your fantasies. I have somewhere to be. She adjusted her handbag, her eyes gleaming with mischief. Just don't forget to call Nara, all right? You know the consequences if you don't convince her properly. With a final smug smile, she turned and left the coffee shop, leaving Andrew alone at the table. As the door swung shut behind her, Andrew sighed heavily and reclined in his chair, rubbing his temples. Elena's parting words lingered in his mind, unsettling him. For the first time, he couldn't help but wonder. What if she's right? What if Nara never comes back to me? He said to himself. He thought back to his recent conversation with Nara. Her voice had been distant, cold, so unlike the warm, caring person he used to know. The memory gnawed at him, planting seeds of doubt. Was she really forgetting about him? He wondered, but no. He couldn't allow himself to think that way. Shaking his head, he forced the thoughts from his mind. He needed to stay positive. Nara had promised she would come back to him once her contract with Gordon was over, and he had to believe in that promise. He couldn't let Elena's manipulative words shake his confidence. She was always looking for ways to tear people down, feeding off their insecurities. Reaching for his coffee cup, he took one final sip, finishing the last of it. Setting the cup down, he stood up and glanced around the now empty coffee shop. The conversation with Elena had left him feeling drained, but he knew he had to stay focused. Nara was worth waiting for, and he wasn't going to let someone like Elena mess with his head. With one last glance back at the empty cafe, Andrew stepped outside, leaving the door close behind him. Whatever games Elena was playing, they wouldn't work on him. He had waited this long, and he was willing to wait longer if that's what it took. Nothing, least of all Elena, was going to break his resolve. Elena stood outside one of the town's most exclusive boutiques, a place known for catering to high-end clientele with its latest collections. The boutique had just released its newest line of designer dresses, and she had been saving for months just to afford one. She wasn't a celebrity, but she loved fashion, and keeping her wardrobe up to date with the latest styles gave her a sense of power and satisfaction. As she pushed open the boutique's glass door, the scent of polished wood and expensive perfume filled the air. A receptionist sat behind the counter, entirely engrossed in her phone, unaware of her coming in. Irritated by the lack of attention, she approached the counter and cleared her throat, announcing her presence. The receptionist quickly looked up, startled, and immediately set her phone aside. "Good day, ma'am. How can we help you today?" She greeted Elena with a broad, professional smile. "Take me to the dress section," Elena demanded, completely ignoring the receptionist's polite greeting. The receptionist hesitated for a moment, confused by Elena's abrupt tone. "Would you like to see our newest collection or our previous one?" she asked, trying to remain courteous. Elena glared at her as if the question was absurd. "Do I look like someone who's interested in old collections? Take me to the newest dresses right now," she snapped. The receptionist was taken aback but quickly masked her surprise. It wasn't her place to judge, even if the newest collection was designed for top-tier celebrities, and Elena didn't fit the typical profile of their usual clientele. With a polite nod, she responded, "Right this way, ma'am." She led her into an elegant room filled with racks of dresses in every conceivable style, color, and size. The room was tastefully designed, with soft lighting accentuating the luxury fabrics on display. Two female attendants stood in the corner, poised to assist at a moment's notice. "We're here, ma'am," the receptionist said, gesturing toward the room. "These are the latest pieces from our collection. If you have any questions or need assistance, feel free to speak with the attendants," she added with a smile before stepping back toward the entrance. Elena barely acknowledged her. Her attention was already fixated on the dress in front of her. She breathed in deeply, the scent of brand new clothes filling her lungs. A smile spread across her face as she took in the sight of the designer pieces. Shopping for new clothes had always been one of her favorite pastimes, one of the few things that made her feel truly in control. It didn't matter what sacrifices she had to make, even if it meant skipping meals for months, as long as she could buy the newest and finest clothing. She began to walk slowly around the room, letting her eyes glide over the delicate fabrics, intricate patterns, and rich colors. For a moment, she simply admired the beauty of the clothes, but soon, the urge to feel the materials overcame her. Looking wasn't enough. She needed to touch them, to experience the luxurious textures under her fingertips. She reached for one of the hangers, her fingers brushing against a soft silk dress adorned with hand-stitched embellishments. The delicate lines were impeccable, and the thought of adding the dress to her collection excited her. She carefully lifted the dress from the hanger and held it up, admiring how it shimmered under the soft lighting. Elena strutted across the boutique floor with purpose, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on a bored-looking attendant standing idly in the corner. Without bothering to soften her tone, she called out, "Hey, you there, where's your changing room?" She barked at one of the attendants. The startled attendant pointed quickly toward a door at the far end of the room. "Over there, ma'am," he replied, trying to mask his surprise at her abruptness. Elena sighed heavily, making sure her annoyance was clear, and marched toward the door. She pushed it open and slammed it shut behind her, the noise echoing in the otherwise quiet boutique. Once inside, she wasted no time. She quickly peeled off her clothes and slid into the short, flared dress. As soon as the fabric settled around her body, a broad smile spread across her face. The dress fit her like a dream, accentuating her curves and giving her an almost ethereal glow. She spun in front of the large mirror, watching as the skirt flared out with every movement. For a moment she felt like a celebrity on the red carpet. She nodded in approval at her reflection, her decision made. This dress was hers. She scanned the dress for its price tag, eager to see if she could afford it. When she finally found it, her smile quickly faded. The price was far higher than she had anticipated. She had come to the boutique intending to buy at least 2 dresses, but if she purchased this one, she would be left with nothing else. The realization stung, but as she stared at herself in the mirror, the thought of leaving the dress behind seemed unbearable. She loved the way it hugged her body and how it made her feel. She made up her mind. She was going to buy the dress no matter the cost. Just as she reached for the zipper to take it off, she suddenly froze. A voice, familiar and sharp, echoed from the boutique floor. Her pulse quickened as the voice became clearer. It couldn't be, could it? Her heart sank. She knew that voice all too well. It belonged to Yvonne, the last person she wanted to see. She crept toward the door, cracking it open ever so slightly, just enough to peek outside. From her limited view, she could see a woman's back, but she was certain Yvonne was there. Panic rose in her chest. She knew Yvonne was infamous for her sharp tongue and even sharper attitude. She was not in any mood to banter words with anyone. Today was not the day for a confrontation. She needed to leave, quickly and quietly. She stepped out of the dressing room, carefully closing the door behind her. She tried to tiptoe toward the exit, but her nerves got the better of her. In her haste, she accidentally knocked into a mannequin, sending it wobbling noisily on its stand. The sound was unmistakable and it immediately caught Yvonne's attention. She turned around, her eyes locking onto Elena with a predatory smile. "Well, well, well," Yvonne said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Who do we have here?" Elena shot Yvonne an irritated look, her face tightening with frustration. Just then, Yvonne erupted into loud, uncontrollable laughter, so much that she wondered if there was something ridiculous about her appearance. "What's so funny?" Elena snapped, her voice sharp with annoyance. "Don't tell me you were trying to run away from me," Yvonne asked through fits of laughter. Elena clenched her teeth, her face flushing with embarrassment. Yvonne had seen right through her. She had been trying to slip out unnoticed. Elena glanced at the mannequin she had bumped into in her frantic attempt to leave the room. "This damn mannequin," she muttered under her breath. When she looked back, Yvonne was still laughing, and her shame quickly shifted into anger. Her temper flared, and she refused to let Yvonne belittle her. Not now, not ever. "And what makes you think I'd want to run away from you?" Elena shot back, her tone laced with defiance. "Who do you think you are that I'd be scared to see you?" The room fell into a tense silence as she stood her ground, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. She wasn't about to let Yvonne turn this moment into something humiliating. "Well, that's how it looked to me," Yvonne said, her eyes darting to the mannequin that lay on the floor. "I'm guessing the mannequin gave you away." "You're wrong," Elena shot back, her voice sharp with anger. "The mannequin fell on its own. Stop making everything about you. You're just a nobody." Yvonne's laughter died abruptly, replaced by a sneer. She paused, then a mischievous smile curled on her lips. Slowly, she walked closer to Elena, stopping just a few steps away. "It's funny to hear you call me a nobody," Yvonne said, her voice dropping low, almost menacing. "Now tell me, who the hell are you?" Elena's face tightened with fury, but she kept her composure. "I don't owe you any explanation. Hold on!" Yvonne cut her off with a sharp laugh. "I can answer that question myself. You're nothing but Nara's lapdog," she hissed, her words slow and deliberate, like she was savoring the sting they would deliver. Elena folded her arms tightly across her chest, her nails digging into her skin. How dare Yvonne? Who did she think she was to call her that? She glanced around the room. The store attendants were still in their places, frozen like statues, not flinching, not reacting. It suddenly struck her. They weren't ignoring the confrontation. They were afraid. Afraid of Yvonne. They didn't even bat an eyelid at where she was. She turned her gaze back to Yvonne, her eyes blazing with fury. "You know what's saving you right now?" she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Those attendants standing over there. If they weren't here, I'd have torn you apart by now." Yvonne's eyes flashed, but she managed to keep her sneer in place. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," Elena snapped, her words like a challenge thrown in Yvonne's face. For a moment, the two women locked eyes, tension crackling in the air between them. Yvonne could feel the heat behind Elena's words, the seriousness of her threat. She knew Elena wasn't bluffing, but she wasn't about to back down just yet. "Why are you so angry?" Yvonne said, a mocking smile creeping back onto her face. "Is it because I called you Nara's lapdog? I mean, it's not a lie, is it? After all, you're the one who jumped at the chance to be her manager. Or are you realizing now that you're just her puppet?" Elena's fists clenched at her sides, but she refused to let Yvonne see how much the words stung. Yes, she had taken on the role of Nara's manager, but she wasn't anyone's puppet. Not Nara's, and certainly not Yvonne's. She took a deep breath, refusing to let the taunt break her. "You've got no idea what you're talking about," Elena said coolly, her eyes never leaving Yvonne's. "And if I were you, I'd be careful what you say next. And what if I don't?" Elena looked at her and shook her head bitterly. "How is being a manager the same as being a lapdog?" She shot back at her, her voice laced with irritation. Yvonne smirked, her tone dripping with condescension. "It seems you don't really understand what being a manager means in the modeling world. But hey, I'm not here to educate you," she said, pausing for dramatic effect before adding, "No wonder you can't even keep a man." The words stung Elena like a slap on the face. Her palms clenched into tight fists as rage boiled inside her. She wasn't about to let Yvonne get the upper hand. "The only leverage you have over me is that you're engaged to that nitwit," Elena spat, her voice rising. "Because I honestly don't see any other reason why you think you can talk down to me. You can't even beat Nara, and yet you think you can challenge me? You're using a man against me when you're with that incompetent fool?" Yvonne's face twisted in fury. "What did you just say to me? Who the hell do you think you are?" she shouted, her voice shrill with rage. In a sudden outburst, Yvonne raised her hand and slapped Elena hard across the face. The slap was so swift that Elena barely registered it at first. Her hand flew up to her stinging cheek, her eyes shutting as the pain radiated across her face. She could almost see stars flash before her eyes. For a brief moment she stood frozen, stunned by the unexpected slap. Before she could fully recover, Yvonne grabbed the front of her dress and yanked it aggressively. "You're trying to steal this, aren't you? I know you can't afford it," Yvonne sneered, pulling at the fabric. "Get your hands off me, you crazy bitch," Elena shouted, pushing back against Yvonne with all her strength. In the heat of the struggle, Elena shoved Yvonne so hard that she stumbled backward, sprawling onto the floor with a loud thud. The store attendants, who had been watching the altercation in stunned silence, immediately rushed over. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" they asked Yvonne in unison, their voices trembling with urgency. One of them hurriedly bent down to help Yvonne to her feet. Yvonne angrily shoved the attendant aside, her face a mask of indignation as she straightened up. But before she could speak, Elena's voice cut through the tension. "Wait a minute, didn't you see when she slapped me?" she shouted, pointing at Yvonne. "Neither of you said a word then. But now that she's on the ground, you're running to her aid?" "Ma'am, we do not tolerate such behavior in the store," one of the attendants said stiffly, clearly trying to remain professional. If you do not compose yourself immediately, we will be forced to ask you to leave." Elena let out a bitter scoff. "You must be joking," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're going to throw me out for defending myself?" She shook her head in disbelief. "You know what? I don't even want to waste another second here. Let me just pay for this dress and get out of this circus." Yvonne smiled mischievously and walked closer to Elena. "You seem to have forgotten the kind of world we live in," she said, her voice dripping with arrogance. "This is a world where money and power are everything." She paused for a second. She started smiling again before turning to the attendants. "I want the dress she's wearing," Yvonne demanded without hesitation. "What?" Elena exclaimed in disbelief. "You heard me," Yvonne replied calmly. "I want the clothes she has on." One of the attendants, trying to de-escalate the situation, spoke up timidly. "All right, ma'am. We have the same dress in our main store. This one is just for display. I can get you another one." Before he could finish, Yvonne delivered a thunderous slap across his face. The sound echoed through the store, and the force of the slap sent the attendant stumbling back, stars dancing in his vision. "Are you stupid or deaf?" Yvonne snarled. "Even if you are, must you showcase your stupidity for the world to see? I said I want the dress she's wearing, and here you are telling me about another one in the store. Do as I say right now or face my wrath, you fool," she shouted, her voice icy with anger. The attendants, clearly terrified, rushed toward Elena, who stood frozen in disbelief at the unfolding scene. "Ma'am, you have to take off the dress you have on," one of them said hesitantly. "And why should I?" Elena snapped, her eyes blazing with fury. She had never been this humiliated in her life. "Why should I take it off when I clearly had it first? Why does she get preferential treatment?" Yvonne, standing smugly nearby, smirked at her. "Because I'm the brand ambassador of this store," she replied, using air quotes as she emphasized the word brand. "And so," Elena shot back, "that doesn't give you the right to treat me like that. I'm not taking it off. Do your worst." She turned, determined to leave, but the attendants quickly blocked her path. Elena's anger flared as she realized there was no way she could leave without complying with Yvonne's demands. She was trapped. "You're wasting my time," Yvonne said impatiently, tapping her foot against the floor. Elena closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and sighed. There was no way out of this. Slowly, she walked back to the changing room. Inside the changing room, Elena could almost feel tears pour from her eyes. She had never in her entire life felt this embarrassed before. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. She watched as the tears flowed freely on her cheeks. She slowly wiped the tears away. Now she finally understood the way Nara had felt all these years. She felt humiliated. As she wiped her eyes clean, she let out a broad smile. She was not Nara in any way. She was going to teach Yvonne a big lesson, one she would not forget anytime soon. She was not going to be humiliated in such a manner without having her own pound of flesh. "Just wait and see what I am going to do to you. You see that high horse you are in? I am going to pull you down from it, and when I do that, I am going to crush to the ground," she said in a fit of rage. A few minutes later, she came out of the changing room, now dressed in her own clothes, holding the dress she had been forced to remove. With barely controlled rage, she handed it to the attendants. As she turned to leave, she stopped abruptly and glared at Yvonne. "Don't think this is over," she spat, her voice thick with defiance before storming out of the store. Yvonne watched her leave with a dismissive sigh. One of the attendants nervously approached her, holding out the dress Elena had just handed over. Yvonne's face twisted with disgust. "Did you really think I would wear something she just took off?" she sneered. "Take this away from me." The attendant scurried off with the dress, terrified of angering Yvonne any further. As Yvonne turned back to the clothing racks, she couldn't help but replay Elena's final words in her mind. "Don't think this is over." For a brief moment, a flicker of unease crept up her spine, but she quickly shook it off immediately. "She's a nobody," Yvonne muttered to herself. "She can't do anything. She's just Nara's lapdog, and that's all she'll ever be," she said finally, and went back to the clothes she was selecting to buy. Soon she began humming a song. It was as if nothing had transpired between her and Elena. Gordon was about to climb the staircase to head straight to his room when Stella intercepted him just in time. "Gordon, you're back?" she said, a warm smile lighting up her face. He nodded, smiling back at her. "So, how did it go?" she asked, her tone carrying an expectation that he would go into detail about whatever had transpired at the meeting between him and his father. Her face, too, showed eager curiosity. He hesitated, his thoughts flickering between what had happened earlier and whether he should tell her the full story. He knew if he told her of his father's plans to sign the company to him, she would hurriedly go and tell Nara, seeing how close the two were. He held himself back from sharing the news with Stella. He didn't want her to tell anyone else, particularly Nara. He wanted to tell her himself when the time was right. "Oh well, nothing much. It's just about Briston," he finally said, opting for half-truth. "Briston?" Stella's face instantly showed concern. "What has he done this time?" Gordon couldn't help but smile at her reaction. He loved how compassionate she was, always worried about everyone, even those who didn't deserve her kindness, like Briston, who had consistently treated her with disdain and a lack of respect. Yet here she was, still caring. "Something about him getting married by the end of the month," Gordon revealed casually. Stella's eyes widened in surprise. "Really?" she exclaimed, her voice now filled with happiness. "You know what? Lunch is almost ready. You can tell me everything during lunch," she added, her voice filled with excitement. "Okay," Gordon agreed. "Oh, and before I forget," she said, her expression softening, "could you bring Nara down when you're done freshening up? She's been sleeping for hours now. Poor girl, she's probably in a lot of pain because of her injured ankle." "You don't have to worry, Stella. I'll get her down once I've taken my bath," Gordon assured her, giving her a nod before continuing up the stairs. Despite his outward calm, Gordon was far from happy. In fact, there was a deep unease simmering within him. His father had just planned to hand over the company, the very thing he had worked towards and dreamed about for so long. But instead of feeling victorious, a strange emptiness gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling, and it puzzled him. As he reached the top of the stairs, he was about to head straight to his room when he stopped in his tracks. Almost instinctively, he turned around and made his way to Nara's room instead. He paused outside her door and knocked gently. There was no answer. He knocked again, but still no response came. Then he remembered what Stella had said about Nara being asleep. Sighing, he quietly opened the door and slipped inside. Sure enough, Nara was sound asleep, lying peacefully on her bed. Her breathing was slow and steady, her face serene. Gordon walked softly toward the bed, careful not to make a sound. He noticed that the duvet wasn't covering her properly. Without hesitation, he reached out and pulled it up, gently tucking her in. Standing beside her bed, he gazed at her for a moment, and that was when the truth hit him like a wave. He finally understood why he had felt so uneasy ever since his father had given him the company. It was because of Nara. The realization settled heavily into his chest. Once the company was officially signed into his name, he would have to leave the country, and this time, it would be for good. He had always known this moment was coming, but the thought of leaving Nara behind was unbearable. He had no idea how to break the news to her, and just imagining her reaction filled him with guilt and dread. She would be heartbroken, and he knew it. Worse still, he didn't even know how to explain his decision to her. How could he tell her that he was leaving her behind after everything they had shared? At that moment, he remembered what Jeffrey had once warned him about. Falling in love with Nara had been a mistake. A dangerous one, Jeffrey had said. At the time, he had brushed it off. But now, standing there, watching her sleep so soundly, he knew his friend had been right. Falling for her had complicated everything, and now he was trapped in a situation he didn't know how to fix. As Nara shifted in her sleep, adjusting her position on the bed, Gordon straightened up quickly, afraid of being caught. He wasn't ready to face her just yet, not with the burden of the secret he was carrying. He slowly walked out of Nara's room, his mind heavy with conflicting thoughts. He made his way to his own room, closing the door quietly behind him. Once inside, he went straight to the drawer and opened it, revealing a small safe where he had kept their marriage contract and all the evidence of how they got married. His hands trembled slightly as he held the papers. He knew it was time to tell her the truth. But the thought of her reaction filled him with dread. It would be better if she heard it from him directly rather than stumbling upon it in some other way. He glanced over the documents, a faint smile tugging at his lips as memories of how it all began rushed back. Just as he was lost in thought, the door burst open unexpectedly and Nara limped in. "Gordon, you're back!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with joy as she hobbled toward him. Startled, Gordon instinctively shoved the documents back into the safe and slammed it shut. His heart raced as he locked it up quickly. "What's that? Why did you shove it in like that?" Nara asked, her face full of curiosity. Nothing much. Just work stuff," he stammered, his voice shaky. He could see from her expression that she didn't fully believe him, and he silently prayed that she wouldn't press further. I thought you were asleep," he said, trying to change the subject and divert her attention. Nara sighed softly. "I woke up a few minutes ago. I smelled your cologne in my room, so I thought you were back. So, how was the meeting with your father?" Gordon's heart sank at her question. How was he supposed to tell her that he was leaving soon, that everything between them was temporary? He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. "Nothing much," he finally said, forcing a casual tone. "Dad just wanted to talk about Briston's marriage to Yvonne." "Hold on, they're still getting married?" Nara's eyes widened in disbelief. "Yeah, it's surprising, right?" Gordon replied, managing a smile. "Of course it is," Nara blurted out. Gordon chuckled. "Well, Stella's almost done setting the table for lunch. Why don't you head down? I'll join you once I'm done with my bath, then I'll fill you in on how today really went." Nara gave him a small, understanding smile. "All right, I'll be downstairs waiting for you," she said, turning toward the door. She limped out, closing it softly behind her. As soon as she was gone, Gordon let out a deep sigh of relief. That had been a close call. He'd wanted to tell her the truth about their marriage, but not like this. Not in a moment of panic with her catching him holding the documents. He needed to tell her on his own terms, when he was ready to explain everything. He didn't want it to seem like he was forced into it because she had caught him off guard. No, he wanted it to come from him, on his own terms. Gordon leaned against the closed safe for a moment, feeling the weight of his secret pressing down on him. He couldn't avoid this conversation much longer, but he needed to be careful about how he approached it. Nara deserved to hear the truth, but he wasn't ready to shatter her world just yet. With a heavy sigh, he pushed himself off the drawer and headed to the bathroom. The cool water from the shower helped to clear his mind, but it didn't wash away the guilt or the uncertainty gnawing at him. What would she think when he finally told her? How would she react when she learned that everything between them wasn't what it seemed? Would she be able to forgive him, or would this be the end of them? Gordon finished his shower, dried off, and got dressed. He knew he couldn't delay this forever. Sooner or later, he'd have to face the truth head-on and confront the reality of what he had done. But for now, he would join her at lunch and try to enjoy the moment, knowing it might be one of the last peaceful ones they would share before everything changed. Gordon had just finished his bath and was making his way downstairs when he heard familiar voices coming from the dining room. It was Nara, Stella, and, to his surprise, Jeffrey. He had invited Jeffrey over to discuss the current situation, but he hadn't expected him to be there already. "Gordon, you won't believe it. Jeffrey is joining us for lunch today," Nara said excitedly as she spotted him entering the room. Gordon smiled. "I'm sure he's finally given in to Stella's persistent invitations," he replied as he took his seat at the dining table. Jeffrey adjusted his glasses and grinned. "Well, last time I was here, I did promise I'd join you all for a meal the next time I came." Stella chuckled as she placed a steaming bowl of spaghetti on the table. They were having Italian spaghetti and meatballs for lunch. "Don't make poor Jeffrey uncomfortable," she teased. "You know how long it took me to convince him to eat with us. I don't want him changing his mind now." With that, she grabbed the ladle and began dishing out the food for everyone. The warm aroma of the Italian spaghetti and meatballs filled the room. "How's your ankle now, Nara? Does it still hurt?" Stella asked as she handed Nara her plate. "Ankle? What happened to her ankle?" Jeffrey asked, surprised, his brows knitting in concern. "Gordon didn't tell you?" Stella said, glancing at Gordon. "Nara had an accident during rehearsals. She twisted her ankle and even had to be hospitalized." "Really? I'm so sorry to hear that." Jeffrey's voice was full of genuine sympathy as he turned to Nara. "Don't worry about it, Jeffrey. It's not as bad as Stella makes it sound," Nara reassured him with a smile. "I'm all right now." Stella gave Nara a playful smile and the two women shared a laugh, lightening the mood around the table. As the laughter died down, Nara sniffed the air, her brow furrowing in thought. "You know, the dining room smells really familiar," she remarked, her tone curious. Stella looked at her and smiled. "It must be the spaghetti." "Oh no, not that," Nara replied, shaking her head. "It smells like something I noticed earlier today. Croissants." Her eyes lit up with sudden realization. Jeffrey immediately felt his palms grow sweaty. He knew exactly where the scent was coming from, him. Earlier he had stopped by a pastry shop and the smell of fresh croissants had clung to him. "Yes, you're right," Gordon interjected with a smile, glancing at Jeffrey. "It does smell like the pastries from Love's shop," he said aloud immediately. Jeffrey folded his pass that already sweaty. He could feel his heartbeat. He wondered if they were going to find out that he actually went to see Love in the bakery. "Are you sure it smells like croissants?" "Of course, yes. I can perceive my favorite pastries fully well." Then, almost immediately, she turned and faced Jeffrey. "Did you go to the bakery outskirts of town?" "Who is Love?" Stella asked, her face filled with confusion. Both Nara and Gordon seemed to be talking about someone she had never heard of. "A nice lady we met today at the bakery," Nara explained. "This whole place smells like her in a remarkable way." "Really? Then it must be from the croissant you bought," Stella replied, raising an eyebrow. "You think?" Nara asked, glancing over at Jeffrey. Jeffrey, meanwhile, was silent. He sat there saying nothing, desperately hoping that neither Nara nor Gordon would pick up the scent that clung to him. He needed to divert their attention before they started asking questions. "Are we eating or not?" he asked softly, trying to shift the focus. Stella smiled warmly. "Jeffrey, you must be so hungry. You know what? I'll leave you all to enjoy the meal while I head back to the kitchen," she said, standing up. "Ma, Stella, stay and eat with us," Nara insisted, her eyes filled with hope that Stella would oblige to her request. Before Stella could respond, Gordon chuckled. "You don't need to waste your energy asking Nara. Stella never sits at the table with us," he said in a light-hearted, jolly tone. Stella laughed lightly, her eyes softening. "Nara, dear, I won't be joining you this time. There's still so much to do in the kitchen and poor Mel can't handle it all on her own," she explained with a smile. "Oh, that's all right," Nara replied, a hint of disappointment in her voice. Stella nodded, her expression kind. "Enjoy your meal," she said before quickly walking back to the kitchen. Stella had always been like that, steadfast, loyal, and deeply respectful of her place in the Antonov family. For years she had served them, growing familiar with each member as if they were her own. She could predict their moods, knew their habits, and had a keen sense of what each one needed without them having to ask. Yet, despite this deep familiarity, she never allowed it to cloud her sense of duty. Even Gordon, whom she had practically helped raise, didn't receive special treatment. Stella maintained a firm boundary, one of which she was deeply protective. For her, sitting with the family at the dining table was a line she couldn't cross. To her, it felt like a breach of the invisible but necessary hierarchy in her world. "Why doesn't Ma Stella eat with us?" Nara turned towards Gordon with an innocent frown as she pushed her plate slightly forward. She had always wondered why Stella, despite her familiarity with Gordon, never shared a table with him. "That's how she is," Gordon replied with a shrug, pausing briefly before scooping a forkful of meatballs into his mouth. "I've tried convincing her 1,000 times, but she's always refused." He chewed thoughtfully, glancing at Jeffrey, who was sitting across the table, quietly enjoying his meal. Jeffrey nodded as if to affirm what Gordon had said. "She's stubborn that way," he added lightly, before taking another bite of his food. Nara shook her head, sadness creeping into her expression. She admired Stella's dedication, but wished she'd let herself be part of the family in more than just a caretaker role. Her thoughts, however, were soon distracted as she lifted her fork and twirled it into her plate of spaghetti. As soon as the food touched her tongue, her eyes widened in pleasant surprise. "Oh my God, this is amazing!" she exclaimed, smiling broadly. "Yeah, it's so good," Gordon and Jeffrey responded in unison, laughing at how synchronized their reactions were. Nara giggled and put her fork down for a moment, remembering something that had been on her mind. "That reminds me, you promised to tell me about Briston and my sister's wedding plans," she said, her tone shifting to something more serious. Gordon leaned back slightly in his chair, sighing. "Oh, right. Well, it seems like your sister has finally accepted the date Briston had set for the wedding." "She accepted?" Nara asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Then why was she ranting the other day? She even slapped him." "That's the part that has everyone confused," Gordon admitted, shaking his head. "Dad doesn't approve of the marriage at all." "Why not?" Nara asked, genuinely curious. Gordon smirked, his eyes glinting with a hint of mischief. "Are you really asking me that question?" he teased. Jeffrey, who had been quietly eating, chuckled at their banter, his plate nearly empty. Gordon's expression shifted to something more contemplative as he continued. "Dad wants me to talk to him, maybe knock some sense into him." "Will you?" Nara asked immediately, though she already knew the answer. She had known Gordon long enough to realize he was unlikely to confront Briston, regardless of what their father thought. I don't know," he murmured softly, his voice trailing off as he reached for his glass of juice. He took a long drink, finishing the entire glass in one go, as if washing away the tension the conversation brought. Nara fell silent, sensing the unease in his tone. She didn't want to push him any further on the subject. She knew Gordon had complicated feelings about Briston, and she didn't want to deepen the divide between family members. Whatever disagreements lay beneath the surface, she preferred to stay out of them. Nara ate her food quietly, though her mind was far from at peace. She couldn't stop thinking about why Jacob had strongly disapproved of Briston and Yvonne's marriage. He had never shown any sign of disapproval towards Yvonne before, or at least none that she could remember. It puzzled her why he had allowed their engagement, but now seemed to oppose their wedding. At that moment she remembered Gwen. Gwen wasn't the one to take a no for an answer. She knew this could stir trouble, a whole lot of problems. Shaking her head, she tried to push the thoughts away. After all, it wasn't really her business. Yvonne had never treated her like a sister, not even once. In fact, Yvonne barely acknowledged her at all. So why should she care? It wasn't worth her concern. "That reminds me, Uncle Peter says to greet you," Gordon suddenly said, breaking the silence. His voice sounded as if he had just remembered something important. "Oh, how is he?" Nara asked, her mood lifting slightly with curiosity. "He's fine. He said Aunt Miriam hasn't stopped talking about you," Gordon replied with a small smile. Nara blinked in surprise. She would never have guessed that Miriam would even remember her, let alone talk about her. The last time they'd seen each other, Miriam couldn't even look her in the eye. "It seems like she has taken a liking to you after helping her in the bathroom?" Nara smiled. She was happy confusion remembered her. A part of her had thought she would forget because of her illness. Gordon soon finished his meal but didn't leave the table. He remained seated, lost in his own thoughts, his brow furrowed. Nara barely noticed. She was busy relishing the food in front of her, but Jeffrey, sitting across from him, certainly did. He could sense something was weighing heavily on his mind. A few moments later, Gordon stood up. "I need to make a phone call. I'll be back shortly," he said, his tone clipped as he quickly headed outside. Nara nodded absent-mindedly, not paying much attention. She hadn't even noticed the troubled look on his face. Jeffrey, however, did. He waited for a few more seconds before excusing himself as well. "Excuse me, Nara," he said softly, pushing his chair back and following Gordon out. Nara glanced around the now empty dining room, feeling a flicker of confusion. Why had both of them left so abruptly? There was a strange tension in the air. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but she knew something was going on. It felt as though both Jeffrey and Gordon were hiding something from her, and for the first time in a while she thought of following them, but remembering her injured ankle, she decided to sit back down. Jeffrey stepped outside, his eyes scanning the yard as he searched for Gordon. After a few moments of looking, he finally spotted him standing by the pool, staring out at the still water. "Here you are," Jeffrey said with relief as he walked toward him. Gordon turned slowly, offering a faint smile, almost as if he had been expecting him to show up. His face carried a mix of emotions that he couldn't quite hide. "What's the problem?" Jeffrey asked, coming to stand beside him. Gordon let out a long sigh, his shoulders slumping slightly. It's nothing. There's nothing to worry about, he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Jeffrey raised an eyebrow, smiling knowingly. You know, you can lie to everyone else, but not to me. Something's bothering you, so just tell me what's going on. Gordon smiled weakly, knowing Jeffrey was right. There was no point in pretending, no point in hiding what was weighing on his mind. With another heavy sigh, he finally spoke. Dad's decided to sign the company over to me, he said quietly, almost as if the news was a burden rather than a blessing. Jeffrey's eyes widened in surprise. Wow, that's amazing news, he said, his voice filled with excitement. Yeah, Gordon muttered, barely able to muster any enthusiasm. Jeffrey frowned, sensing that there was more to the story. Hold on. You don't seem happy about it. Isn't this what you wanted all along? Gordon nodded, but his expression remained conflicted. Yes, it is, but... He trailed off, looking down at the ground. But what? Jeffrey asked, his brow furrowing in confusion. Wait, don't tell me this is because of Nara? Gordon looked up, and for a brief moment, his eyes were filled with a mixture of guilt and pity. Jeffrey shook his head, disappointed but not surprised. I warned you, Gordon. I told you having feelings for her wasn't a good idea. I know, Gordon said, his voice strained. But I'm in a tough spot now. I need to tell her about this, and about the truth, about our marriage. I can't keep hiding things from her. Jeffrey's eyes widened in shock. Wait a minute. You haven't told her about the marriage yet? Gordon shook his head, his face darkening with regret. No. I've been waiting for the right moment, the right time. But now everything's closing in, and I can't wait any longer. Geez, Gordon, that's a lot to drop on her, Jeffrey muttered, running a hand through his hair. You've been keeping this from her all this time? Yes, Gordon admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. I wanted to protect her, to wait for the right moment, but now I realize that might have been a mistake. I don't want to hurt her, Jeffrey. I need to tell her the truth, but I don't know how to do it without making her get the wrong impression of my intentions towards her. Jeffrey sighed deeply, trying to make sense of the situation. Look, you're going to have to take it easy, Jeffrey said finally, placing a hand on Gordon's back in a gesture of comfort. You can't avoid this conversation forever, but you also don't need to rush it. Just be honest with her, and things will work out. Gordon nodded, though he still seemed uncertain. I just hope I can do this without her hating me, he murmured. You'll be fine, Jeffrey assured him. Just take your time and handle this carefully. She'll understand if you're honest with her. Gordon gave a small, tired smile. Thanks, Jeff. I hope you're right. With a final pat on the back, Jeffrey shook his head and stared at the pool in front of him. He would not lie the moment Gordon told him the news. He felt some kind of way. He wondered about what he was going to tell Love. They just started bonding not quite long ago. Damn, he said as he steadied his glasses on his nose. He too was also in a big mess. It had been several days since the last rehearsal, the one that left Nara with an injured ankle. Now, another rehearsal was scheduled, and despite the setback, she had been practicing hard at home. Most days, Gordon helped her, and sometimes Stella or Mel stepped in. Rehearsing had been difficult at first. Walking in heavy heels while nursing her injured ankle was no small feat. But as her ankle healed, she started to get the hang of it again. This morning, Nara woke up with a light heart and a smile spreading across her face. She knew it was going to be a good day. The past few days of intense practice had paid off, and she had mastered walking in those heavy heels despite the injury. Her confidence had grown, and the pain had subsided just enough for her to feel steady on her feet. Today, she was ready. Ready to show Vanessa that she was more than capable, ready to prove that the injury hadn't slowed her down. With each step she took in those heavy heels, she was determined to make it clear. She had put in the work, and now it was time to shine. She quickly took her bath and got dressed in a short flared gown, choosing it intentionally to highlight her long, straight legs. As she stepped out of her room, she made her way toward Gordon's door and knocked lightly. "Come in," Gordon's voice called out from inside. With a smile, Nara gently pushed the door open. "Good morning," she greeted, her face bright with a cheerful expression. Gordon, already dressed in a crisp white shirt and black tuxedo trousers, returned her greeting. "Good morning," his voice warm and sweet. Nara walked slowly toward him, her hands casually behind her back, moving in sync with the rhythm of her legs as she approached. "Looks like you're all ready to head out?" she asked, noticing his polished appearance as she drew closer. Gordon nodded. "Yes, Jeffrey and I are visiting the construction site today. We need to check on the progress, plus I've got a few business meetings lined up later." "Oh, wow. You sure have a busy day ahead," Nara said. Gordon nodded. "Yeah, it's going to be a full day, but isn't today your big rehearsal?" "Yes," Nara admitted, her voice softening. "I'm a little nervous." Gordon smiled warmly and stepped closer, cupping her face gently in his hands. "Remember what we practiced? Steady breaths?" he reminded her, his eyes full of encouragement. She held his gaze, touched by his support. She placed her hands over his, giving them a gentle squeeze. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do you want me to drop you off?" he offered, still holding her gaze. Nara shook her head with a smile. "Oh, no. You stay and enjoy breakfast. Besides, Tyler has already prepped the car for me." Gordon raised his eyebrows. "You're not staying for breakfast?" Nara chuckled lightly. "You know I never have breakfast on days like this. Too many nerves." Gordon sighed but smiled. "All right, just promise you'll have fun today. And don't forget steady breaths," he said, repeating the mantra they'd practiced over the last few days. Nara nodded. "I won't forget," she said, whispering a soft goodbye before turning toward the door. She gave him one last smile as she closed the door behind her. Left alone in the quiet room, Gordon shook his head with a fond smile. As much as he wished she'd stay and eat something, he understood her ritual for big days like these. Still, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of concern for her. She had worked so hard for today. He vividly remembered the long hours she had spent practicing, even when her ankle had been swollen and painful. Despite his many pleas for her to rest, she had persisted, determined to perfect her walk in those impossibly heavy heels. He admired her dedication, but he also knew how much was riding on today's rehearsal. Deep down, he hoped everything would go smoothly for her. Nara had poured her heart into this, and he wanted more than anything for her efforts to be rewarded. Most times he had considered putting a call to Harry to prevent Nara from continuing with the rehearsals and just adding her name to the list of the models that would walk the runway show. But on a second thought, he refrained from doing so. He didn't want it to seem suspicious. He didn't want unnecessary rumors to spread. Tyler brought the car to a smooth stop in front of Dynasty Agency. For the first time since she had been signed, Nara didn't feel nervous stepping out. In fact, her injury and the time spent recuperating had given her a chance to reconnect with herself. Today there was no anxiety buzzing under her skin, no second guessing. She felt calm, composed, and confident. She got out of the car, her spirits high, and smiled warmly at the security guard standing at the entrance. They bowed in response to her cheerful demeanor. Nara nodded politely and began walking, her steps slow and dignified. Every movement exuded grace, and her long black hair, which fell freely down her back, swayed with her as she walked. Heads turned in her direction, and she could feel the eyes of passers-by following her. She didn't mind. In fact, she embraced it. For the first time, she truly felt like she belonged. "Nara?" She heard her name called from behind. She turned, curious, and found Harry approaching her with a concerned look. "How are you? I heard about your ankle injury," he asked as he drew closer. Nara smiled softly. "Good morning, Harry. I'm fine now, as you can see," she said, gesturing to her healed ankle. "Everything's back to normal." Harry nodded but still looked a bit apologetic. "I'm sorry about how things went down at your first rehearsal. I heard what happened." Nara waved it off with a smile. "It's fine. Really, there's nothing to apologize for. It was just an accident and I'm past it now." Harry glanced around as if checking to see if anyone was watching, then stepped a little closer. He gently took her hand and squeezed it, his expression softening. His grip was firm but tender, as if he wanted to reassure her. "You know, Vanessa can be tough sometimes," he said quietly. "But that's not all there is to her. She's actually got a sweet side too. You just have to put in the effort during rehearsal. Once she sees that, she'll warm up to you." She glanced down at Harry's hand as it covered hers, a sudden wave of irritation washing over her. Why was he holding her hand? They weren't even close enough for that kind of gesture. She looked at him, wondering if he was in his right mind. Keeping her composure, she slowly wiggled her hand free from his grip, maintaining a polite smile. I already know, and that's why I've practiced a lot to prove myself worthy of her, she said firmly, at the same time glancing at her watch. Harry, I think I need to get going. I don't want to be late. With that, she smiled, turned around and walked away, leaving Harry standing there. He watched her leave, a mischievous smile curling on his lips before shaking his head and heading off. By the time Nara arrived at the rehearsal room, it was already packed. But this time, unlike before, she wasn't nervous. Anxiety was far from her mind. Her only focus was impressing Vanessa. She had prepared endlessly, and today was her moment to shine. As she stepped into the room, all eyes turned toward her. She could feel their stares, but she wasn't fazed. She caught sight of Yvonne out of the corner of her eye, seated in the front row with her usual circle of friends. Yvonne's gaze was fixed on her, watching her every step. But Nara didn't flinch or acknowledge her. She kept her head high, walking with poise and aura. Today wasn't about Yvonne or anyone else. It was about proving her worth to herself and to Vanessa, and nothing was going to distract her from that. Nara walked straight to where Stephanie was seated, waving and smiling at her, trying to get her attention. Good morning, Nara whispered as she took the seat beside her. Stephanie turned to her in surprise, her eyes wide. You look different today. Nara raised an eyebrow, curious. What do you mean? I mean, you don't look like you usually do when you come in here, Stephanie said, still eyeing her. This time you look different, more confident. Nara laughed softly, brushing off the compliment. So, how's your ankle? Seeing the way you walked in, I'm guessing it's all healed up, Stephanie asked, her voice laced with concern. Oh, it's fine now, Nara replied, waving her hand dismissively. Phew, I was really worried you might not make it today, and even if you did, I thought you wouldn't be able to rehearse with us. You know, Vanessa can be scary at times, Stephanie said, leaning in a little. Nara smiled, unfazed. No, she's not. I actually find her interesting. Stephanie stared at her, shocked. Are you sure you're in the right frame of mind? After the way she treated you? If I were in your shoes, I wouldn't even want to be around her. She humiliated you in front of everyone. Nara shook her head gently, her expression calm. No, she didn't. I made a mistake and she corrected me. That's all. Stephanie blinked in disbelief. Wow, she said, shaking her head. I have to admit that's rare. Most people would have taken it personally, but you're impressive. Nara smiled at the compliment but didn't respond. She wasn't holding any grudges against Vanessa. She had learned early on that in this industry, criticism often came from a place of wanting to push people to their best, and she respected that. Before Stephanie could continue, the distinct clacking of heels filled the room. The low hum of murmuring from the models died down almost instantly as everyone turned their attention to the entrance. Vanessa strode into the room, commanding everyone's gaze. She was dressed in a striking red gown that hugged her tall figure, her lips painted a bold red to match. Her hair was swept up into a sleek bun, giving her an air of authority and a matchless aura. Nara, admiring the sight, leaned toward Stephanie and whispered, Isn't she gorgeous? Stephanie gave her a sideways glance, smiling in amusement as she shook her head lightly. You're something else, she muttered with a grin. Good morning, ladies. Vanessa's voice rang out, crisp and commanding as she took her place at the front of the room. Her presence silenced any lingering whispers. Good morning, they all greeted back, their voice filling the entire room. Nara sat up straighter, her eyes following Vanessa's every movement. She felt a surge of energy course through her. Vanessa surveyed the room, her sharp eyes scanning each of the models before her. I hope everyone is ready for today, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. We have a lot to get through, and I expect focus and dedication. Nara felt a wave of calm wash over her. She had put in the work, and now she was ready to show her what she was capable of. There was no fear, no second-guessing, just quiet confidence. She caught Vanessa's eye for a brief second, and for the first time, Nara felt certain that she was exactly where she needed to be. Vanessa's sharp eyes scanned the hall as if she were trying to read each model's thoughts. The room fell silent under the weight of her intense gaze. Then, suddenly, her expression softened into a smile. "Shall we begin?" she said, her tone brisk and authoritative. Vanessa smiled as she scanned the room, her eyes sweeping across every model seated before her. It wasn't a casual glance. She seemed to be studying each of them, dissecting their expressions, as though trying to read their thoughts. When her gaze finally landed on Nara, she paused, staring at her for what felt like an eternity. Nara felt the intensity of the look, but kept her face neutral, refusing to show any hint of nervousness. Vanessa then looked away, her attention back on the other girls. "It seems like Vanessa was staring at you," Stephanie whispered to Nara, nudging her slightly. Nara smiled, shaking her head. "That's not true. She was looking at everyone," she whispered back, though deep down she felt unsure. Vanessa's eyes had lingered just a little longer on her, and she knew it. Vanessa cleared her throat to speak. "Now, our last rehearsal was the challenge of walking with the heavy heels. Most of you did excellently well, but some of you failed woefully." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. "Today you will repeat the same routine," she continued, her tone sharper now. "And let me remind you, you've had more than enough time to perfect your walk. Failure to perform well today will result in automatic disqualification from the runway show. Your rehearsals will end here." A collective gasp swept through the room. The models exchanged nervous glances, their faces pale with shock. No one had expected the stakes to be this high. Most had assumed they would complete all the rehearsals before waiting for the final runway list, but the thought of being disqualified today sent a shiver of anxiety through them. "As usual, the heavy heels are under your seats. Retrieve them and put them on," Vanessa instructed, waiting patiently as each model slipped on the shoes. Once she was sure they were ready, she cleared her throat. "We will begin with the front row." The first girl in the front row stood up and made her way to the runway. She walked with grace, her steps smooth and confident. As she finished, applause erupted from the group, her performance flawless. One by one, each model took their turn, some walking with poise, others with a hint of hesitation, but all performing well enough to avoid any obvious mistakes. Then, it was Yvonne's turn. She stood up with an air of superiority, her confidence at its peak. As she strutted down the runway, it was clear she had mastered the challenge. Her walk was fierce and flawless, the heavy heels seeming like nothing more than a natural extension of her body. The other girls watched in awe. There was no denying Yvonne's skill. She earned a loud round of applause as expected. Finally, it was Nara's turn. As she stood, she felt the weight of every gaze in the room on her. She could sense the tension, the curiosity, and the doubt. Her infamous fall during the last rehearsal had been the subject of every conversation. Now, as she rose to walk again, most of them were silently waiting for her to fail. "You can do this," Stephanie whispered from beside her, giving her a reassuring smile. Nara turned and smiled back, feeling a surge of determination. She took a deep breath and steadied herself, her eyes locking briefly with Vanessa's. Vanessa was watching her closely, expectation clear in her gaze. Nara knew she couldn't afford another mistake. Not today. Yvonne leaned over to her friend with a smirk. "Let's see how she pulls this off." Her friend, equally amused, rolled her eyes. "She's going to fall like last time. I can't believe they're even letting that incompetent girl walk with us." "Don't worry," Yvonne replied, grinning wickedly. "Once she fails today, she'll be kicked out for sure." Meanwhile, Nara stood quietly, straightening her legs and adjusting her posture. She could feel the weight of the heavy heels, but she wasn't going to let them intimidate her this time. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes, recalling Gordon's reassuring words. "Steady breath," she repeated to herself, as she inhaled deeply and exhaled slowly, calming her nerves. Suddenly, Vanessa's commanding voice broke through the silence. "Begin!" Nara opened her eyes, a confident smile slowly spreading across her face. She rose with grace and poise, her body fluid and controlled. As she stepped onto the runway, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Her legs moved in perfect harmony with her body, each step accentuating her natural rhythm. her fierce, steady gaze locked forward as though she were possessed by an unshakable determination. The transformation was remarkable. The girl who had stumbled and fallen last time was now walking with confidence and elegance. It was hard to believe this was the same person who had been humiliated in front of everyone. Her injury from the previous rehearsal was forgotten, her former mistakes erased. Nara was walking with such precision and power that it was impossible not to be captivated. The other models watched in stunned silence, their earlier doubts evaporating with each flawless step she took. Yvonne's smug expression faltered, replaced by disbelief as she realized Nara wasn't going to fall. Far from it, she was owning the runway. Vanessa, seated with a critical eye, found herself transfixed. She had known Nara was talented, but this was something else. In that moment, she saw a reflection of her younger self in her. The same determination, the same resilience. Back in her day, she had overcome many obstacles, much like what Nara was doing now. The comparison made her smile inwardly. Yvonne had been the standout so far, her fierce walk nearly perfect, but Nara was surpassing even that. Vanessa had thought she had seen the best earlier, but watching Nara now, she realized there was always room for surprise. Nara didn't falter. The heavy heels didn't cause her to wobble or misstep even once. She walked with such strength and precision, her movements smooth and graceful. And when she reached the end of the runway, she twirled to make her turn, her long black hair sweeping behind her like a curtain of silk. The way she moved, how her hair flowed as she turned. It was all breathtaking. The girls seated collectively gasped. This wasn't just a good walk, it was the best walk of the day. Yvonne stared at Nara, her eyes blazing with anger. This was not what she had expected. She had been so sure that Nara would fall again, just like before. Instead, the girl in front of her had completely transformed. She couldn't stand the looks of amazement on everyone's faces, and when she glanced over at Vanessa, she saw her smiling at Nara, something she hadn't done when it was her turn to walk. She clenched her fists in frustration, the nails digging into her palms. This wasn't supposed to happen. How could Nara, who had fallen so hard last time, who was injured, come back and pull off such an incredible walk? It was like Nara had returned stronger, more powerful, and Yvonne was still in shock. "Wow!" the girl seated next to her exclaimed, her eyes wide with awe. Yvonne snapped her head toward her and shot a furious glare. "Shut up!" she hissed, her voice low but filled with venom. Nara's walk had shaken her to her core. She had always believed she was the best, and now, watching Nara dominate the runway, she felt her confidence waver. How could Nara, of all people, have walked so flawlessly, especially after that humiliating fall? Finally, Nara reached the end of her walk and turned to face Vanessa, a bright smile lighting up her face. She knew she had done it. The look of admiration on Vanessa's face, along with the stunned expressions from the other girls, told her everything she needed to know. She had proved herself. Suddenly, the entire hall erupted into applause. The sound was deafening, a roaring wave of approval. Nara stood there momentarily overwhelmed by the realization that they were all clapping for her. Her heart swelled with pride. This was everything she had ever wanted, to prove herself, to silence the doubts, to be respected. As she took in the applause, she spotted Vanessa standing and clapping as well, a broad smile on her face. Nara's joy deepened, her eyes welling up with tears. She fought to keep them from falling, but they were tears of pure joy, tears that marked her triumph. All the hard work, the late-night practices, the pain and frustration, it had all paid off. "You may return to your seat, Nara," Vanessa said softly, her smile still present. Nara nodded in acknowledgement and gracefully walked back to her seat, her heart still racing from the adrenaline and the overwhelming sense of accomplishment. As she moved through the room, she could feel the eyes of the other models on her, some envious, some impressed. It didn't matter to her anymore. She had finally earned her place. "Oh my God, you were amazing out there," Stephanie whispered excitedly as she sat down beside her. "Really?" Nara asked, her voice still a little shaky from the excitement. "Of course, you have no idea how incredible you looked. It was beautiful." Stephanie's face lit up with pride, as if she had walked the runway herself. "Thank you," Nara replied, her smile growing even wider. Stephanie threw her arms around Nara, beaming with excitement. It was clear that she wanted everyone in the room to know that Nara, the girl who had just wowed everyone, was her friend. Vanessa returned to the front of the room to address the models. Now, we have come to the end of today's rehearsals. Most of you did exceptionally well, and some of you failed woefully. She paused, her eyes sweeping across the room. But many of you came back stronger after a huge and epic fail. Nara couldn't help but laugh when she heard that. She knew Vanessa was referring to her. Be that as it may, I want to commend everyone for a job well done, Vanessa continued. The date for our next rehearsal will be sent to you via email. If you don't receive an email, it means you are no longer part of the rehearsals and won't be walking the runway with us. Have a nice day, ladies. With a final smile, she turned and walked out of the room, the sound of her heels echoing loudly as she left. As soon as she was gone, the room erupted into noise. Everywhere Nara looked, people were whispering and pointing at her. It was as if the entire room had shifted its attention toward her. See, Nara, they're all looking at you, Stephanie said, nudging her gently. Nara glanced around in disbelief. It was true. Everyone was staring at her. The girl who had once been ignored, doubted, even ridiculed, was now the center of attention. Her hard work, the endless nights of practicing, had finally paid off. Come on, let's go, Nara said, standing up. I'm starving. Stephanie laughed and stood up as well, but just as they were about to leave, Yvonne stepped in front of them, blocking Nara's path. Nara sighed. She had no energy left for Yvonne's drama. All she wanted was to go home, eat, and sleep. What is it, Yvonne? She asked, her voice edged with irritation. Yvonne glared at her, fury burning in her eyes. So, you think you're better than all of us now, huh? I never said that, Nara replied calmly, not in the mood to argue. Shut up, Yvonne barked, stepping closer. Nara's patience was wearing thin. You know what? I'm not going to stand here and let you talk to me like this. She turned to Stephanie. Let's go! But as Nara tried to move past her, Yvonne grabbed her arm and yanked her back, her grip tight and aggressive. Who the hell do you think you are, walking out on me like that? Yvonne shouted, drawing the attention of the entire room. Nara's eyes narrowed, her anger rising. She had tried to avoid confrontation, but Yvonne had pushed her too far. Before Yvonne could even react, Nara's hand flew through the air and landed a sharp slap across Yvonne's face. The sound echoed in the room and Yvonne staggered back, momentarily stunned. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she felt the sting on her cheek. The room fell silent, everyone frozen in shock. The next time you grab me like that, I will beat you so badly that you won't even recognize yourself anymore. Nara fired at her angrily, looking at her straight in the eye. Yvonne couldn't believe what had just happened. She pinched herself, hoping she was dreaming, but the sharp pain from the slap Nara had given her confirmed it was real. Her cheeks stung, and as she looked around, she noticed everyone's eyes fixed on her, seemingly waiting for her reaction. The weight of embarrassment settled in her chest, and she knew she couldn't let this slide. With fury boiling inside her, she turned to face Nara, giving her a cold, angry stare. Are you raving mad? How dare you lay those filthy hands of yours on me? Yvonne's voice quivered with rage. Nara smirked, unfazed. Who the hell do you think you are? Listen to me, Yvonne. The next time you touch me with those filthy hands, I'll teach you a lesson your mother clearly didn't. You mannerless swine. Gasps filled the room as Nara's words hung in the air. No one had ever dared to speak to Yvonne like that. Stephanie, who had been standing beside Nara the whole time, let out a soft chuckle, her eyes gleaming with amusement. Finally, someone was putting Yvonne in her place, and she was relishing every moment of it. Yvonne's face contorted in fury. Nara, you've got the nerve to speak to me like this now? You've lost all fear, haven't you? You now speak to Mother as you please, right? Just wait till Mother hears what you've done. She'll put you in your place. Nara laughed lightly and then squared her shoulders, facing her directly. And who the hell is she that she can't be spoken to in that way? You know, Yvonne, I've had enough of your nonsense. You'd better learn to respect yourself, or this agency will be too hot to accommodate the both of us. Her voice was sharp, her words cutting deep as she warned her. Yvonne stared at her in disbelief, irritated and shocked that Nara had found the nerve to talk to her like that. This wasn't the Nara she once knew. Back when Nara was living with them at the Vespertine mansion, her eyes had always shown fear, uncertainty, and submission. But now, the look in Nara's eyes was completely different, steely and unyielding. They didn't show fear anymore. They radiated something far greater. For the first time, she felt a flicker of fear herself, but she couldn't let it show. Not in front of the other girls who were watching intently. She needed to maintain control, to be the intimidating force she always was. Her mind raced. She needed to act fast, to say something that would crush Nara, something that would put her back in her place. Her voice dripped with venom as she smirked and spat out. "You know, I've realized what's making you so bold now. It's because you married Gordon, isn't it? Ever since you became an Antonov, you've been acting like you can rub shoulders with me. You think you're someone important now, don't you?" "Let me burst your bubble, Nara. Do you honestly think you're here in this agency on your own merit? The only reason you're here is that the Antonovs are the highest shareholders, and that's the only thing keeping you in this place. Without them, you'd be nothing. So don't get it twisted." Yvonne took a step closer, her voice colder, more vicious. "You need to come down from your high horse because without the Antonovs, you are nothing but an illegitimate, ungrateful daughter of a bitch." Everyone gasped at Yvonne's sharp comeback, their eyes flicking toward Nara, wondering if she could recover from such a blow. Yvonne smiled victoriously, certain she had finally put Nara in her place. Her words had stung deep, and now it was time to make her triumphant exit. There was no way Nara could come back from what she had just said. As Yvonne turned to leave, Nara suddenly burst into loud, heart-rending laughter. The sound echoed through the room, catching everyone off guard. Nara laughed so hard that the other girls began to exchange confused glances. Was she okay? Stephanie, standing beside her, nudged her gently, urging her to stop, but she kept laughing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she wiped a tear from her eye and let out a heavy sigh. "You know, Yvonne," Nara began, her voice still tinged with amusement, "you really do amuse me. Tell me, aren't you also engaged to an Antonov? Why do you feel so intimidated around me? Are you scared?" Yvonne stiffened, her victorious smirk fading as Nara's words cut through the air like a knife. Nara's smile widened. "Let me tell you something. I worked hard to be where I am today. Even if Gordon helped get me into this agency, so what? You're the one who's scared, Yvonne. I see it. You know deep down that Briston, your precious fiancé, is nowhere near my husband's level, and that's what's eating you up inside, isn't it?" Nara paused, letting her words sink in. The room was deathly silent, and all eyes were now glued to them. Nara stepped forward, closing the distance between them, until she was standing face to face with Yvonne, her expression daring her to respond. "Don't you think you should be scared of me?" Nara said, her voice soft but dangerous. She smirked and raised her hand, snapping her fingers in Yvonne's face. "With a snap of my fingers, I can get you out of here." Yvonne's eyes widened in fury. "You wouldn't dare!" "Then try me and see," Nara said coolly. "You'd be better off putting all this energy into getting yourself married to that nitwit fiancé of yours instead of wasting your time barking up the wrong tree." "How dare you!" Yvonne shrieked, her face flushed with anger, her eyes bloodshot. Nara had struck a nerve she was not going to recover from that easily. Nara, however, remained unfazed. "Move," she commanded, her voice emotionless and firm. Yvonne hesitated, her fury threatening to boil over, but something in Nara's unwavering gaze forced her to back down. Without a word, Nara shoved past her, walking out with her head held high, Stephanie trailing closely behind, glancing back at Yvonne with a smug grin on her face. The room buzzed with the aftermath of the confrontation, but it was clear. Nara had won. Everyone stood in shock, their expressions frozen as they tried to process what had just happened. Nara had single-handedly put Yvonne, the self-proclaimed queen of the Dynasty Agency, in her place. No one could believe it. It felt surreal, almost like a dream. Yvonne had always been untouchable. Until now. "What are you all staring at?" Yvonne screamed, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. She glared at the girls as they hastily looked away, pretending to be occupied with something else. "Move! Move out of my way!" she shouted, her voice rising as she shoved her way through the crowd, desperate to get out of the room. The humiliation was too much for her to bear. She could feel the weight of their stares, the whispers already starting. She had to escape before the embarrassment consumed her. Meanwhile, inside the elevator, Stephanie was still riding the high of what had just happened. "Oh my God, Nara, I didn't know you had that in you. You really taught Yvonne a lesson she won't ever forget. I mean, she's going to think twice before messing with you again. I'm so proud of you," Stephanie said excitedly, her face lit up with admiration. Nara smiled, though her mind was elsewhere. She had it coming. "I'm not sure why she ever thought she could keep talking to me like that," she replied, feeling a slight sense of satisfaction. The weight that had hung over her since joining the agency had lifted, if only temporarily. "See? I've been telling you all day, you came in with a completely different energy today. You're finally standing up for yourself. You were amazing," Stephanie continued, beaming with pride. Nara gave her a small smile in return, but she was only half listening. Her mind kept circling back to something Yvonne had said in the heat of their argument. Stephanie's words became a distant hum as her thoughts took over. "The Antonovs are the biggest shareholders in the agency," Yvonne had claimed. How had she not known that? It felt like a key piece of information that had been kept from her. And if Yvonne was right, what did that mean for her position at Dynasty? Was she only here because of Gordon? Had her signing with the agency been Gordon's doing all along? The realization settled uneasily into her chest. She had always thought her place in the agency was earned, the result of her hard work and talent. But now she wasn't so sure. Her mind raced as memories began to fall into place, moments she had dismissed suddenly taking on new meaning. She thought about the first day she had walked into Dynasty with Gordon. The way the security guards had given him a level of respect that seemed almost excessive at the time. She had shrugged it off then, but now it made sense. She remembered how the board members had stood up when she had entered the room to sign her contract, treating her as though she were royalty. All this time she had believed it was because of her talent. But now she was beginning to suspect that Gordon's influence had more to do with it than she had realized. Her chest tightened with a growing sense of frustration. Why hadn't he told her? She hated being kept in the dark, and this felt like a betrayal. If her entire career at Dynasty was a result of his behind-the-scenes maneuvering, then what had all her hard work been for? She needed answers, and she needed them now. The moment she got home, she would confront him. There were too many questions swirling in her head, and she wasn't going to let this go. "Are you even listening to me?" Stephanie's voice cut through her thoughts, snapping her back to the present. Stephanie tugged lightly on her dress, trying to get her attention. Nara blinked, nodding absent-mindedly. "Yeah, I'm listening," she muttered, though her mind was still spinning. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, revealing the first floor. Nara stepped out first, her pace quickening as if she could outrun the confusion that clouded her mind. Stephanie followed closely behind, still chatting away, oblivious to the turmoil brewing inside her friend. As they made their way toward the entrance, Nara heard someone calling her name. The voice was familiar, almost too familiar. She stopped in her tracks, her heart sinking as she turned to see Andrew standing by his car, waving at her with a smile. Nara froze, her stomach twisting. What is he doing here? She hadn't seen Andrew in weeks, and now, of all places, he had shown up at Dynasty? She felt a wave of irritation wash over her. Right now, he was the last person she wanted to deal with. There was too much going on in her head, and seeing him only added to the mess. "It seems that guy over there knows you," Stephanie said, noticing Andrew's enthusiastic waving. "He must be mistaken," Nara lied without hesitation. "I don't even know him. Let's go." She turned away quickly, increasing her pace as she headed toward the exit. Stephanie looked confused but didn't press the issue. She followed Nara as they walked briskly to the other side of the building, leaving Andrew still standing by his car, his smile fading as he watched them disappear into the distance. "It seems your driver is here," Stephanie said when she caught sight of Tyler standing in front of the car. Nara smiled. "Your manager?" "Oh, he is just over there," Steph answered immediately. "Okay then. I better get going," Nara said, smiling. Steph looked at her and smiled. Then she pulled her for an embrace. "You did great today," she said finally, before breaking from the embrace. "Oh, bye," Nara said softly as she immediately got into the car, which Tyler had already opened the car door to. Stephanie waved back as she walked to where her manager was on the luxury bus,